How do you recover from burnout?
Well, I can speak from personal experience on this.
Is there a way to find peace in the midst of grief? Ooh, we're diving in the deep end.
I'm loving this.
I tend to get easily hurt in relationships. I think I might be too sensitive.
Whoever you are, pat yourself on the back. What's up?
How's it going?
Oh, it's going really good. How about you?
I noticed your choice of hat today, and I fully approve. As of the time, that might be a little annoying for people to hear in the microphone.
That's fine.
Okay, well, as of the time
That's what it reminded me of.
As the time of this recording, Ohio State is headed to the national championship
Yep.
against Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and call that they won.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully,
this ages well. I feel. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel good about it. If you will, if the court reporter will recall what happened during the final moments of the last game.
Yes. So context. We're jumping right in the middle here. So the Buckeyes recently beat Texas.
Yes.
In the Cotton Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
4th down and goal from whatever the 8-9 yard line, something like that.
Final moments of the game.
Pre-snap, Shaylyn says, "Strip that ball."
I said, he's going to strip it.
He's going to strip the ball.
I didn't tell him what to do. I said, he's going to strip this ball.
And right on cue, Jack Sawyer, strip sack.
Nicely done, Jack.
Scoop and score, took it to the house.
I believed in you. I never doubted you for a second.
I
could see it in your eyes.
It was a prophetic word from a prophetess.
We were all jumping around and screaming.
Who just became a prophetess because she's never prophesied a thing until that moment.
It's a good place to start.
It was a good one to come true.
I felt like that was a really good place to start.
I feel really good about this game, though. I don't think Notre Dame can hang. I really don't. Bro. I mean, I don't think they can score. Okay, so
the word you used was ransacked.
We lost 2 games, one to Oregon in a shootout. So it was in the 30s, 30-something to 30-something. Lost by whatever, 1. And then we lost to that team up north by 3, and it was the only game all year we were held under 20 points. Mm-hmm. So I think the only chance Notre Dame has is to hold us under 20 points. I don't think they can score. If it's a high-scoring game, it goes into the 20s, and God forbid for Notre Dame, the 30s, it's over. There's no way they can score like that in our defense. I don't believe. But we'll find out, and either way, I'm proud of these guys, man. Great group of guys.
Incredible team.
You know, a lot of times I've always been a Buckeye fan. I'm cheering for people I don't know. I know a bunch of these guys. Wonderful human beings.
Yeah, really, really are.
Incredibly sincere. I couldn't be more proud, and I mean that in the least condescending way possible. I'm not any of their dads.
Yeah.
But I am so proud of the way that whether it was
you are their pastor for many of these guys. So I mean, I think that's really special.
Tremendous adversity they've been through. Some low lows, some high highs. Every single time they're taking a knee before the Lord. They're taking and giving God the glory. Win, lose, or draw. And and it really is sweeping the country. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is. Like, it's impacting a lot of people. Yeah. And, you know, I'm so grateful, and I know where it's coming from. It's coming from really sincere people. So you see something like that, you just can't help but cheer for and root for them.
100%. I think it's so cool because a lot of times you see people, you know, they'll get up and they'll say that they give all the glory to God, and they may act a certain way on the field or whatever. But the fact that you've had this opportunity, you know, we've seen so many of these guys behind the scenes, the way they give of themselves, even when they're in a hard time themselves, and the way that they serve other people and look out for other people. We've watched them take care of people in all kinds of different walks of life and seasons, and be just really good human beings behind the scenes. So kudos to them.
Yeah,
it feels good to see a good guy win.
So here's what I'm going to tell you. I lost my voice yelling for Travion Henderson's, that little screen pass he caught and he took to the house at the end of the first half. I probably yelled louder for that than I did the game winner by Sawyer because, again, Travion, he gets an unnecessary roughness penalty. You could see in his eyes, like as soon as he did it, he's like,
He was frustrated with himself.
and we've all popped off with a little unnecessary roughness
I
here
did
and there.
that last week.
You do exactly. You do that, and immediately
shove
you're like,
somebody in the
I
face,
can't
but I
undo
did
it.
pop
I just hurt
off.
my team. He goes to the sideline, man. He gets his mind right. He said later, he's like, I went over and repented. And he's like, and God met me right there on the sideline. I'm like, dude, I know this guy. Like, he is so sincere.
Yeah.
And so I actually text my buddy. I was like, I promise you, this dude's going to do everything in his power to make up for that mistake. Catches that ball, hits the 40, dude, and looks.
Has a type of gas in the tank
on,
that is
dude.
wild.
He hit 6th gear, dude. That looked like an Olympic track meet.
Yeah, that was
gone.
impressive. That was impressive.
And when he hit that gear, I
Screamed.
yelled, dude. I woke up the neighbors, dude. That was so exciting. Again, I just felt so
Hudson
good.
came down to check on you and make sure you were
He's
all
like,
right.
Dad, you okay?
Why are you yelling?
Did you see the before and after numbers?
Bro,
Yeah.
I'm sitting there, my heart's breaking because I'm like, okay. They literally put up a graphic saying, hey, before the penalty, after the penalty, and essentially putting the whole weight of the stalling of the offense on that penalty, which may or may not be true. I don't know, but that's a lot to put on a young dude.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, and right on cue.
It was like
Catches
right
that
after the
thing,
graphic.
little shimmy, see ya.
Well, did you see that after he made that play, the numbers were identical before and after?
No.
The yards were identical, the points were identical, and the plays were identical.
What a life lesson.
Yeah.
What a life lesson. We're not going to go over here and live in shame.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to fix it. We're going to fix it in our minds and hearts, and then we're going to get out here and give our absolute best effort.
I love that.
It was wonderful.
Well, for those of you who are new here to the Dialogue podcast, this is not a sports podcast, but we do love our Buckeyes very, very much. So moving into, listen, we can make it a sports podcast.
Probably shouldn't. We don't really have the credentials for that.
I think that's debatable. You have the credentials. I don't.
I really don't.
All right. So moving into our question and answer portion of the podcast. For anyone that's new, what we do is we take a question. We take about 10 minutes. We put it on a timer. Do we have the sound effect? Ooh.
That means it's
fully
done.
baked.
Like a toaster.
Yep. So if we need a little overtime, we can take it. But we try to keep our answers to 10 minutes and answer the burning questions that you submit to us. So feel free to send them in. Pop them in the comments. Send an email. What's the email again? Is it questions?
Dialogue@ONE.CHURCH.
There you go.
It's in the description.
There you go.
Nice.
So you ready to dive in?
Yeah.
All right.
Why
let's
not?
do it.
Here we go.
First one up. How do you recover from burnout? Ooh, we're diving in the deep end.
Well, I can speak from personal experience on this.
Greg, would you like to share?
So, okay, burnout. I guess we need some sort of definition, some sort of working definition.
Sure.
It's hard to know if you're burned out. It's kind of like think about a car. Like when it's burned out because it's just not. It won't turn over. It won't start. It's run out. Maybe it's run out of gas, and so you literally have a gas gauge that tells you that it is on. It's beyond empty, and now it's not working. A human being, when it comes to your emotions, mental, whatever, I don't have a gas gauge. So in a sense, like, could I pick myself up and carry myself from point A to point B? Yes, I could. I'm not a car, but I feel like I have no motivation. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm emotionally numb, and everything in me wants to pull the covers up over my head. I want to quit everything.
It's truly just no joy in life, barely going through the motions.
I feel like I'm out of gas, right?
Yeah.
And so I've been in that spot. I think I've talked to people, hear from people that are there, and I think you got to kind of take a look at in that moment, not allowing yourself to fall into full despair, maintaining some hope, and to look at some things. How did I get to where I am? This is kind of a theme, I think. And, we talked about New Year's resolutions, and if I haven't been able to keep up with my New Year's resolution, well, look back at how you got to this point. Mm-hmm. Why did the other ones not work? I think we look at this and go, what did I do? Like, was I overextended in terms of my schedule? And so I said too much yes. Is it season of life? We had these major life events, related to your family. Maybe there are high maintenance issues there. It's things that are really, really stressful, a lot of pressure, a lot of change. And sometimes you can be in the midst of a lot of things going on, and until you step outside of it and look at it, you go, wow, that really was a lot, right? So I remember, like, I think back on when you and I got married. It was like we got engaged in November. I graduated college in December. I took a new job, my first job, in January. We bought a house in February and got married in March. So it's like 4 of your top 5 or 6 life change things that will
and I was
completely.
Gonna say, in the middle of that, also, my grandfather died the day before our wedding.
Right.
I mean, just, yeah, it was like
all kinds
of
of
them.
stuff. So in the moment, I didn't really go, hey, we just had 5 huge things. You're just kind of like going. And so even the good things like a wedding, and then bad things like a death, it's all taken its toll.
Yeah.
So then it's like a year later, whatever, you look back, you're like, dang, do you remember? That all happened in 5 months. So I think people sometimes find themselves burned out, and you step back and look and go, man, I took a new job, and we had a baby, and we lost this over here, and I had that big conflict over there, and I took on this big project over here, and I didn't subtract anything from my life. It was all addition, and here I am, and I feel like I can't move. I overextended myself. And what you go into what I would call emotional debt. I can look at my bank account, go, I spent all my money and charged a bunch of stuff, and now it's all in the red. Well, what about emotionally when you're just doing so much, right? And mentally, you're overloaded and you end up in debt. So I think the way to work yourself through it, I always go back to Luke 10:27. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbors yourself. That's how we're wired. We're wired heart, emotional, mind, mental, strength, physical, neighbor, relational, and spirit, spiritual, soul, spiritual. So I think you start to look and go, okay, I need to look at my habits. I need to look at, where I need to restore, where I need to take a break, what I need to stop doing, what I need to do more of. Like, I need some more things being added to my tank, added to my account. And I need to basically stop the deductions as much as I can. And there are some deductions you can't stop. I can't stop all the deductions, but there are some that I go, I totally could. Probably one phone call, I could stop that deduction. I could deal with that thing. Yeah. I heard something the other day too, and then I'll kick it to you, but it was actually a guy talking about dealing with stress and anxiety. And he said, a lot of times I have anxiety around areas I could take action, but I haven't. And the action isn't even necessarily that I solved it. It's that I took action. So if you have an area that's kind of out of control and there's something you could do, I could go have that conversation. I could put that thing in motion. I could set up that appointment. I could do that. You take the action you can take, and it may not solve it completely, but it starts to give you a little bit of energy back. What are your thoughts?
No, I think that's very true. I think that gives you a little bit of relief. I mean, I know I've been there. There have been times where I'm like, this is an elephant in front of me. And sometimes you feel like, I don't even know where to start. Just take a bite somewhere, right? And pretty soon you're 5 bites in and you're like, I still have 95% of an elephant left, but like at least I've moved the needle. I'm going somewhere. I'm headed the right direction. And I think that really, I totally resonate with what he said there. I think that's very true. I think just taking any kind of action that you can is really helpful. I also think that a lot of times, I know for me personally, and I've heard this from a lot of other people, we tend to not want to ask for help. We tend to feel like this is my problem, my circus, my monkeys, whatever. You can hire other people to work at your circus, and I think that again, taking some of those actions where it's like, is this something that I can delegate? Is this something that I can hire out? Is this something that I can just get a partner in my family, my community, my marriage, whatever, to get some help with this thing? Because I think there's some embarrassment sometimes in feeling weak, right? To go like, I feel like I should be able to do this by myself right now, but I can't, and the reality is that's not weakness. It actually does take strength to get to that place where you go, you know what, I am going to take this step, take this action, and ask for some support. And I mean, again, that's one I'm preaching to myself as much as everybody else, because I understand that can be hard to do.
Yeah.
In a place like that.
Yeah. I experienced some version of burnout probably like 2 or 3 years into our church plant. And I look back and it was like, we did the pre-launch in a way that was really, really challenging. We didn't, like, I worked a job, I was bivocational.
You worked 3 jobs.
Yeah, it was.
And I worked 2.
Yeah, it was. So like we kind of took that path where the entrepreneurial phase, you're sort of thriving on fear in some ways. Like, oh, if we don't do this, it's not going to get done. So you're kind of running on that. Then the church gets going. You're trying to get it just where it's sustainable, and we have some kind of stability. And then in the middle of that, you're dealing with all this change, and everything feels potentially catastrophic. Everything feels like, oh, this could be the big one. And so that all of that season, a few years in, I just felt like, we lost some relationships, and we had to hurt some feelings and had our feelings hurt and all this kind of stuff. And so you get to the spot where it's like, I was just wiped out. And I started to step back and realize some of it were psychological shifts I needed to take. Some of it was, I need to reset my pace. I can't like that. That was a startup pace.
You can't live at a sprint.
I can't live at that. No. I got to reset, and I got to count the cost of doing that and embrace the risk associated with that for the reward, which is to be able to, establish a life that I actually want to live, to be able to be healthy. I think you have to do some of that. I am nowhere near burnout right now, but like I've been, feeling a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety around just, these building projects. It's a tiring season. Yeah, everything I'm trying to do. And so recently, a good personal example is I've been struggling to keep my energy to what I need it to be in order to do what I need to do. And so then also again, this year I'm turning 45. So I have some stress around man, this is the age where stuff starts going bad, and
parts start breaking down.
Both my dad and my grandfather, had heart attacks. And so I'm like, am I good? And just wanted to make sure I don't let down my family. I don't let our church, all this people down. So I was just like, what is my reality? I know in general, I can work out hard and whatever, but I don't know how healthy I am. So I set up a meeting. I set up an appointment with a doctor. I set up a blood test. I set up all, just some new rhythms and processes that I really haven't had. I've kind of gotten away with being young enough to just exercise, eat right, fairly, you have what you need. And it's like, no, you know what, I'm going to put, so literally just setting the appointment, going to the appointment, getting my blood draw, doing all that stuff, slowly, a little bit at a time, even before, I get better supplements or whatever. Even before I solve the problem, it started to have an impact in terms of giving me a little bit more energy to go about. So I would say to the person who is, what advice I would have on a person who's in the burnout position would be, don't fall into despair. Look at heart, soul, mind, strength, neighbor, right? Look at all these areas. They're all related to each other. And start one at a time, taking steps, the steps you can take, the stuff you do have control of. Start to take control of the areas you do have control. And I think you'll start to get a little bit of momentum, and that'll all start to impact each other.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
But it might be a long road, and you got to embrace that as well. You're not going to wake up tomorrow, take a magic pill.
Right.
And feel great. If you do, that's probably the wrong pill.
Okay. That's a good place to move on. Next question. How can I deal with feelings of regret and unresolved emotions after losing a friend? And is there a way to find peace in the midst of grief? So I will say, first of all, I think there's a couple different ways to read this question. I'm not sure when they say losing a friend, if they just mean losing a friendship or actually losing someone, they passed away.
We've had both. We've had people ask both.
Yeah, so I think we can kind of address both for sure. do you have anything? I don't want to jump on top of you if you had a
I
thought.
have lots of thoughts, but I talked a lot last time, and I don't want to.
Well, I mean,
I don't want to talk over you.
You have a lot of good things to say. I think I actually just want to tee it up to you because I think you and I had a really great conversation recently when it comes to regret.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really applicable here and valuable.
Yeah.
So you want to touch on that?
Yeah. So full kind of disclosure, we just went to a funeral for somebody we really love and care about.
Yeah.
Ourselves, and so whoever's sending this in, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation related. When you think, this person died in a car accident and it was completely unexpected. Nobody saw it coming. And so it's one of those things like, sometimes the handwriting's kind of on the wall for somebody. It's like, hey, they've got 6 months to live or whatever. And then sometimes it's in a snap of a finger. And so you're hit with this wave, right? And so we were talking about the relationship between regret and guilt. So, for example, I was telling you, if you died, I would, like, if you died, God forbid, today, I would have some regret. And some of it would be, I would look back at the last 20 years of our marriage and I go, man, there was some seasons in there. I could have loved you better. I should have loved you better, or I should have demonstrated my love to you better. Like, I realized at the time, knowing what I knew, and seeing it the way I saw it, I said things or I did things that were negatively affecting you. You may not have even been fully conscious to be able to communicate like, wow, that really triggered or ripped open a scab or it rhymed with, some other pain in your life. And so for me, I might have thought I was being honest or shooting straight or whatever. And so doing, and sometimes even in my own pain, I was causing you pain. And I look back, I'm like, man, I regret that. I look back, I'm like, I could have loved you better. I shouldn't have said those things or whatever. You look at somebody who, I remember we had one time a young man in the church, he died. He ran out of gas on the side of the road and he was waiting on a gas can. And so a distracted driver hit him and killed him. And I remember his mom going like, oh, if only I had, filled up his tank or if I would have given him money for gas, like, so she's going through a regret, right? So our tendency is to associate regret always with guilt. I feel guilty because I didn't give him $20 for gas a couple days ago, or I feel guilty because I didn't love you the way I should have in that season. And I think what we tend to do, like if I'm sitting across from someone who's dealing with regret, I say, oh no, you didn't know, there's nothing you could have done. We're trying to absolve them of the regret. But I think it's because we tend to link those two. So we think if you have regret, you have to have guilt. I would say to that mom, I totally understand. Like, it's not wrong for you to have regret that you go, I could have done that, I didn't. It would be wrong to hold on to the guilt.
Right.
Because you didn't know.
No. You had no way of knowing.
Yeah, and I look back at our marriage, I'm like, I've always tried to love you the best I could. Now, at times, I might have become emotional or short-sighted, or I was naive. I was ignorant. I thought I was doing right. I was doing wrong. I thought I was bringing clarity. I was doing damage. So I can look back, and yes, absolutely. I think you hear people sometimes go, oh, I don't have any regrets about anything. I think what they're trying to say is I don't feel guilty about anything. Right. I'm not holding on to it. I think I can look back. I think the best way to handle regret is to look at it, give yourself grace, which removes the guilt, but it's okay to have regret. Mm-hmm. So I think when, you're dealing with, unresolved emotions, don't necessarily conclude that having regret means I have to hang on to guilt.
They don't have to go hand in hand.
They don't.
Sure, sometimes they do, right? Sometimes we intentionally did something wrong at a time, and we feel terrible about it.
Yeah.
And that's a healthy kind of guilt to go along with it, and then you go, because it's going to lead me to repent and to make it right. But the idea that they have to be linked is wrong, because they don't. I think a good way to say it is like regret is, I wish I had done this other thing. I wish I had done something different. But guilt only gets linked with it if I knew I was doing something wrong. If you had no way of knowing something, or if you were doing the best that you could at the time, and now that you know better, you're doing better, but you were doing the best you could at the time, then guilt is not even appropriate to go with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's also like, so if I put myself in the seat of the person feeling regret, right? And I'm sitting here going, I'm looking back on things I can't go back in time and change. And you're my friend and you're trying to console me and you're like, well, Greg, that's not your fault. And you shouldn't feel bad and don't regret that. You shouldn't regret that, da, da, da. If I'm sitting there, I feel like I have to choose between, what I actually believe, which is that I regret this thing. And either, the cognitive dissonance of like, I'm either going to deny what I believe to be true, which is I regret it, so that I don't have to feel guilty, or I'm going to hang on to the guilt. And I think it's like, no, you don't have to do that. You can actually go ahead and essentially hold on to the regret. I'll always regret that I didn't do that, but I won't always feel guilt that I didn't do that. If I could do it over again, absolutely I would.
I was going to say, that's the most intellectually honest place to live.
I think being able to mentally detach, like they don't have to be linked. Regret and guilt don't have to be linked.
Another example for me personally would be in parenting, right? Parenting kids with special needs is a whole different animal than, there's no playbook. I mean, there's already no playbook for parenting, but doing that is even more different, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like, a specialized playbook would have been nice, and you don't have any handbook. And so, then trying to help navigate our neurotypical oldest daughter through, how she lives her life with the siblings that she has, how we help the boys. I have plenty of regrets along the way. And I look back with the privilege of hindsight now, and there are things that I go, man, I wish I would have done that different. That's regret. But I have the grace for myself to go, it was all new. I was getting information in real time. I was doing the absolute best that I could with what I had.
Yeah.
I do know that. So do I have some regret? Yes. Do I feel shame and guilt? Like, man, I just didn't even try. I did wrong, but no, I don't have that. And that is a much more honest and peaceful place to be able to sit and learn from. You'll learn more when vision's not clouded by guilt.
Yeah. So I had something recently. I was struggling to work my way through my emotions on a decision that I made that turned out to be a wrong decision. And I was feeling personally guilty about it. I was feeling a little bit angry at myself. I was feeling a little bit angry at other parties. And one of the things I was able to sort out mentally was there can be a difference between a bad decision and a wrong decision.
Right.
So for example, I look back and I'm like, hey, that decision I made was wrong, but it wasn't a bad decision.
Right. Because based on all the information you had at the time,
100%. I
that
thought
felt
it out.
like the right decision.
Yeah, a bad decision would have been I did it haphazardly.
That's right.
I did it carelessly. I didn't think it out. I didn't use logic. I didn't listen to anybody. I just, ready, fire, aim. And I look back and I'm like, man, every way you make a good decision, that's how I made that decision. It just turned out to be wrong. So on the back end of it, instead of going and just raking myself over the coals and staying bitter and angry, I was able to work myself through the emotion going, no, actually, I did all the fundamentally sound steps of good decision-making. Turns out that one didn't work out well.
Yeah.
And so it turned out to be a wrong decision, but not a bad decision. I'm
That's
not
right.
a bad decision maker. I just made a wrong decision. And that's not a cop-out. It really
No,
is
it's
like
not.
having the discipline to go back through it and go, how did I get there? Man, that's how you do it,
That's right.
But it didn't work out right. So again, that's the question being, how do I work through unresolved emotions? I think some of those things, you have to take things like guilt and regret, or things like a bad decision, a wrong decision that seem to be linked, and decouple them from those things and be able to look at those, individually. And I think when you do that, it's not like immediately, emotions are great. It might take a little while, but I think being able to kind of think of it in those ways starts to help you work your way through it.
I think the other thing that is so honoring of the relationship, whether it was someone you actually lost physically, or just someone that is no longer in your life. Um, I've heard people talk about, when you lose someone, grief is the love that you have for them, and it kind of has no place to go, right? And I do think that's a great description of it, but I think that's only half of the story. If you let it sit in you, you just let the unresolved, or the love that has nowhere to go, if you let that just sit in you like this, and the grief sits and the regret sits, it starts to rot and become poison, and it can really be detrimental to you. But the most honoring thing you can do for this other person, and for the lessons that you've learned through the regret and the unresolved emotions and the grief, is you go, I'm going to take this love that I felt for them, and I'm going to turn it outwards and start putting it out into the world. And I'm going to apply all the things I learned through the regret, so that there's not guilt there. And I'm going to treat other people lovingly like that. I'm going to treat other people the way that maybe I wish I had treated in this moment, or say the things that I wish I had said. I'm going to be good to the people around them. I'm going to release this love and give it a place to go.
Yeah.
And I think it heals you, and it heals the world around you. And I know that can sound cliche, but it's really not. It's a deep, good lesson.
Yeah. I think you think about the correlation between the magnitude of love and the magnitude of grief.
Yes.
So you go, if you have someone who was really important to you, someone who you really connected with, a really great person, when you lose them, there is going to be an equal and opposite reaction.
That's right.
You're going to have, it will absolutely turn into that magnitude of grief. So you got to kind of decide, am I going to defend myself to grief? That means I'm going to have to defend myself from love.
That's right.
So if you, like, it's pretty simple. Like, if you never want to grieve anyone, just don't love anyone. Like, if you just go through life not loving anyone, you'll never have to grieve anyone, because you won't care about losing anyone. You won't care about anyone dying. You won't care about anybody walking out of your life. But if you take that risk, and you think of all the value, I mean, that love is the point. It really is the point. And so, but you have to sort of be prepared and not totally caught off guard that grieving is a privilege.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It in some ways is, it's evidence that you had great love for someone, and it's part of the totality of the human experience, which, when you're in the middle of it, is excruciating.
Yeah.
So I like even the way the question was framed around working through, dealing with feelings, working through unresolved emotions. It is a process.
I'm curious. So the funeral that you guys went to, I was in a part of as well, and the friend that we lost, like, I've had a hard time working through it. Grief isn't something that I've really experienced before, and I was having a hard time the other night, and my wife was like, "Do you want to sit and pray together?" And I was like, honestly, no. Like, I know that God will be ready to talk when I'm ready, but right now I'm just having a really hard time. And I've talked to friends who've worked through grief and heard similar sentiments coming from them. I'm curious, like, or even it might just be a little reassuring for you guys to tell me that that's normal.
Yeah.
Because it feels like, which I feel like I know God's heart enough to know that he's gracious and he's not mad, but it feels weird to try to work through that grief and understand that God is a source of help, but really not even, I don't know. It's like, I don't even want to work through it. I just want to feel what I'm feeling.
Well, I think prayer, we tend to think of prayer like, do you want to pray? What you were saying is, hey, honey, I don't really want to sit here and go, "Dear Jesus, I'd like to talk to you today about,"
right.
okay. And so that, I think in some ways that's probably a limited view of what prayer actually is.
That's good.
It's not just talking to God, it's communicating with God, and God speaks the language of tears.
Yeah.
God speaks the language of silence.
That's right.
God speaks the language of you not even being able to move, right? So the idea is, like, you're thinking, your thoughts are happening. I think we have a big enough view of God that he can engage even if I'm not addressing him directly.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, you're going, hey, I may not be ready to start forming paragraphs and articulating in English to God, but I wouldn't say that as you and God have lost communication. You're probably he's probably communicating and comforting and coming alongside you in ways through people in quiet moments and even in tears. So,
well, if Jesus were there in the flesh, I would have laid my head on his shoulder and cried.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think that, like,
well, and you know what? You laid your head on my shoulder and cried.
right.
And so, in a sense, like, I'm not Jesus, but the Spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives inside of me. And this is why, again, community is so important. We don't just put content out through podcasts. That we have a physical community of the body of what do we call it, church? The body of Christ.
That's right.
Right.
So we were at a funeral with a few hundred people who were holding each other and crying on each other's shoulders. And in a sense, that's an aspect of prayer. That's an aspect of, you know what I'm saying, working and connecting with Jesus is connecting through each other. So 100%, like, in a sense, Jesus was there. And that was a moment of prayer, even though we didn't do it in the way that maybe we've seen it done or perceived that you have to pray in this way, right?
Right. And what I said to Bailey was, like, I wanted to be with her as I was grieving, but I didn't really want to talk because I didn't have really thoughts. I just had emotions, and I wanted her to be present with me in those emotions because I needed that support. But I feel like that there was maybe a sense of urgency to articulate those that I didn't feel like I needed.
No, I think that was completely appropriate. And honestly, that's something we saw Jesus himself model for us.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was in the garden before his crucifixion, he wanted his friends close, but he wasn't sitting there talking with them the whole time about what he was going through. He's like, just be here. I just need you to be here. And so to think that somehow he would not understand and empathize with us in our moment of grief, just needing presence, but not words.
Yeah. I mean, working through emotions is a custom process.
That's right.
So like when I'm sad, I don't want to talk about it. Anybody that tries to make me talk about my sadness is going to upset. It's going to frustrate me. It's going to be counterproductive. So I would be more like what Brandon was saying. I'm going to want to be quiet, and I don't mind somebody's company there, but if you keep trying to engage me verbally, that's not, it's actually counterproductive.
Right.
So again, to go, well, I think sometimes people then maybe start to categorize and go, well, see, I'm not talking to God.
Yeah.
If that's how you want to see it, that's fine. But I don't think you have to see it that way. I don't think you and God necessarily, you were throwing an elbow at God or whatever.
Not at all.
I think you were sitting there going, I'm working it through in my way. And
Yeah.
it's not like God's so petty in communication that he's like, why are you giving me the silent treatment, Brandon?
Right.
I think God knows you better than God made you, crafted you, dude.
Right.
I think it's okay. Like, I think he's cool with it.
Right.
And I think what you said was really telling when you said, if he was here, I would want to lay my head on his shoulder and cry. Well, he knows that. He knows that. So he's okay with just being present with you in that moment while you hold those feelings. So.
And he's brought people into your life whose shoulder you can cry
That's
on
right.
again.
Right. That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, Greg, I struggle with this too. When I get injured, I don't want to talk. So like if I stub my toe, Bailey's like, are you okay? And I'm like, don't talk to me. Like, do you feel that same way? Like if you like hit your head, is Shaylyn like, are you okay? And you're like, leave me alone.
That's Hudson for sure.
When I'm angry, I do want to talk, but everything I want to say is not good. So if I stub my toe, I'm biting my tongue on purpose.
No, I feel you. I'm like that though. If I'm like minorly injured, I'm gonna be like, man, and I'm gonna be talking about it. I hurt my finger. Look at what I did.
Yeah.
If I broke something or I'm in labor or whatever, I'm like dead silent.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear breathing. I don't even want to hear my own breathing. Like dead silent.
Yeah.
Every time I used to stub my toe, Bailey used to be like, are you okay? I'm like, I think I'll be fine. I'm just
like, dang.
She's learned to wait a few seconds to ask. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay, babe. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
All right. Last one. Or is it the last one? I shouldn't just say that.
Yep.
All right. I tend to get easily hurt in relationships. I think I might be too sensitive. Any advice on how I can grow in this area? First of all, the
I like
self-awareness is fantastic.
I'm loving this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for somebody to go,
Big respect.
I'm not sure, but I might be the problem. And if I am, I want to address it. So first of all, kudos to you, question
Yes.
asker. Greg?
I would say big respect to anybody who would admit that they might be too sensitive. I think that takes some strength, some toughness to even consider that, right?
Yeah.
So whoever you are, pat yourself on the back. Okay, so let's think about this. Let's think about a spectrum of sensitivity, right? So on one end, we'll say the way we'll define the edges. On one end, it's you get offended from people who are not trying to offend you.
That's a good way to say it.
Right? So they're not even trying to offend you, but somehow you got offended.
I got a little backup support. Go ahead, keep going.
What's going on
I
here?
drank all my water.
What's going on?
I have some secret Red Bull.
Did you just pull that out of your purse?
No, it was on the floor next to my chair.
Okay. Where were we? Okay, so the one end of the
Being
spectrum,
offended when people are not trying to
people aren't
offend
even
you.
trying to offend you, and yet you get offended. On the other end of the spectrum, people are trying to offend you, and you're not getting offended. All right, so that would be the spectrum. I think if you look and go, if I consistently find myself getting my feelings hurt by people who aren't trying to, so you go to them and go, hey man, you hurt my feelings. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to hurt that.
Yeah,
I didn't
had
mean,
no
I didn't
idea.
mean
I'm
it that
so
way.
sorry.
And if you're honest enough to go, wow, I'm starting to see a pattern in my life that I'm getting
I'm
my
taking
feelings hurt.
things personally all the time.
Or I tend to go, oh, so-and-so hates me.
Right.
Really? Did they tell you that? Did they say they hate you, or they just looked at you funny?
Right.
And so you took the look to be that they hate you, or
Right.
they don't give you eye contact, or they don't address you when you come. Like, dude, they might be socially awkward. They might be intimidated by you, not necessarily hate you. Like, there's a lot of
And sometimes it's something that has nothing to do with you. Like
zero.
You walked in and they were absorbed in work, or they were thinking something catastrophic happened in their life, or they're running through their to-do list. There could be a whole host of things that literally have nothing to do with you, and they were absorbed in something else and maybe didn't even notice.
And they may
you.
be highly sensitive and think you hate them. So the bottom line is, the one end of the spectrum is people are not trying to hurt your feelings, yet you're getting your feelings hurt. And I think Ryan Breth sent me a video recently. I think it was Simon Sinek, and I sent it to you actually. And he said, anytime someone reacts on a scale of 1 to 10, like above a 5 on something petty, they're just telling you it has nothing to do with this thing.
Yeah.
So, for example,
And by petty, you just mean something small.
you're squeezing the toothpaste in the wrong spot. You're
And they
breathing too
lose
loud,
it.
and they're like, "Dude, you're chewing your food loud." And they snap on you. They react above a 5.
I've heard it said a level 10 reaction to a level 4 problem.
Sure.
Like
exactly.
not equal.
You're
Yeah.
like,
So-
what the heck? Where did that come from? Like,
Yeah.
it leaves you bewildered.
Sorry, I was blocking the aisle in aisle 11 at Kroger. Like, it didn't deserve me to be cussed at, right? So like, when you have somebody react above a 5, they're just telling you it's really not about you blocking the aisle or squeezing the toothpaste. They're telling you there's something else going on. And by the way, it should be telling them that. I should be telling myself that. So if I find myself really triggered by a look, I'm triggered by I wasn't properly addressed or whatever it is, I might be too sensitive. Now it's letting me know, hey, there's something else. What is it? Do I, maybe there's a lot going on that's led me to feeling like I don't have value, and that thing made me feel like I didn't have value, or whatever it might be, right? So I think it's like, there you go. That's what you got to deal with. And if you go deal with that over time, you get to work your way to the other end of the spectrum, which is even people who do try to offend you. Let's just say, they came for you. You're like, you know what? Yeah. Not that big a deal.
Right.
They got other stuff going on.
Exactly.
Now you're giving them
able to-
grace.
That's right.
You're
Now
going,
you're able to go, that actually, I know that doesn't have anything to do with me. Like,
exactly.
You're coming for me like that. And again, there's a difference, just to clarify for people, there's a difference between somebody coming to you and bringing something you actually did wrong and you blowing them off and not accepting responsibility. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody's just trying to bully you, hurt your feelings, get under your skin, trigger you, whatever. for whatever petty reason because it's making them feel better, and it doesn't even get to you.
Yeah, like
because you're like,
from time to time
clearly something's going on for you, man.
Yeah, I'll have somebody, online or whatever, whether it's in a comment or I have people make videos. I've had people kind of, going, hey, this guy is whatever. They portray me in a way that's tremendously reductive. And it doesn't feel good, but I can kind of go, most of the time I go, I get it. I get where they're coming from. Here's their fear. Here's their concern.
Right.
I, in some way, seem like the prototype of something that they don't like.
I touched on something that is
it's really not
for them.
me. They don't know me. They don't know me very well. If they did, shoot, they might feel it even stronger, or they might feel it and go, hey, actually, I've had people before. I actually got an email from a guy recently who had only seen snippets of me in our church and had this really specific view. He kind of put us in a category and whatever, and he showed up to a service and we were baptizing people, and he heard a full sermon and he was there for the full service, and he's like, hey, I have to apologize. Wow. I thought this and this and this about you. We came there in the church and whatever. He's like, and I stand corrected, man. Keep up the good work, right?
Oh, good for him. Man.
So
that's really cool.
That was encouraging, and I thanked him, and actually I gave him a call and thanked him and whatever. But at the end of the day, for every guy that'll do that, there's 100 that won't go that far. They'll just look at it and then they'll just throw daggers, right? So if I can get to a place where I'm like, have enough, peace internally that I can give grace to someone who's even trying to strike a blow, you go, I understand. I get it. I get how you see that. I get how I could, in some ways, be a representative of things that don't have anything to do with me. Therefore, I give grace to someone who's even trying to hurt me. So I think, and I'm not perfect or I'm not the ultimate example, but that's, again, where I'm trying to live my life. And I think what you have to do is go, hey, if I'm reacting above a 5, I find myself too sensitive, I'm going to be honest about that pattern. I get offended all the time. I find myself looking for supportive ears for me to talk about how everybody's got it out for me or another person hurt me. And if you don't get to the bottom of that, you really can get stuck in it, really get stuck to where it's like everybody is hurting me. And here's another example, and here's another example. So it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. At some point you go, no, I'm not saying it's all your fault, but I'm saying at some point you got to go, there's something in me that's wounded. And we talk about if you give a firm handshake to a broken hand, that person's going to feel abused. They're gonna go, oh my gosh, why'd you do this? So I got to kind of be like define that reality and go, what's the work I need to do to get to a place where eventually I can even give grace to people, who are taking shots.
Yeah. So to backtrack a little, I think the action step for this person, we've kind of said it, but I want to boil it down for them, for you to go back and look at some instances where maybe somebody's, you've had an above 5 reaction to something that somebody did or said, and you're finding yourself triggered by some things and it's feeling like really hurtful, and you do know that person didn't mean to hurt you or that it was just a very small thing. So good for you for being self-aware. I would suggest once you've identified some of those things, start backtracking and digging a little bit and going, when are some of my earliest memories of that? See how far back that goes, because a lot of times that'll help lead you to some source material for why you feel the way that you do. And maybe a whole belief has grown up and bloomed out of these like seeds of certain things that happened. And so for you to be able to backtrack a little bit and go, I can remember all the way back to being a kid and, this hurt me or this hurt me. Maybe there were people that made you feel like you were never good enough. Maybe there were people that you should have been able to turn to for unconditional love and you couldn't. So you kind of started believing that about everyone, that no one could really love me. Start identifying where some of these fully formed beliefs that you might have about yourself came from, kind of abstract ideas that hardened, and start dismantling that. Because that's going to help you make a lot of progress.
I would say too, like, especially in certain areas where, you're going, man, I'm probably being too sensitive, or I might be being too sensitive. Really start to try to look at things through the other person's perspective. For example, I've had people over the years who were friends of mine who were offended because I went a long period of time without reaching out to them or checking in with them, right? And so they took that as I didn't care about them, or they took that as I didn't value them. And the reality is I do value them, but there's a lot of people I value.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if they just took a few minutes to go, okay, this guy has a family. He's got 2 kids on the spectrum. He's not trained for that. He's trying to get trained in real time. He's trying to figure that out. He's got a married. He's got, things he's doing at the church. He's got like a lot of responsibilities. This is not personal. And
he's just
my
expectation, a lot of balls.
My expectation of him just going like he should be thinking about me all the time. Well, when you come to I do, and I feel great affection, but to kind of sit there and kind of calculate and maybe even just take a few minutes to kind of jump into someone else's lens. So if I'm like, yeah, this person, I think they should have done this or that or the other thing, just do the best you can for a moment to sort of look through their lens.
That's
and
right.
go.
It's really good.
Because once you do that, you go, well, that's not personal.
Right.
They don't mean that. It's, they're a
not
human
trying to hurt
being
me.
trying to live a good life, do the best they can. And in the process, I sort of I was maybe forgotten about a little bit. I was out of sight, out of mind,
Mm-hmm.
which makes me feel devalued, but that's not what they're doing.
That's
and
right.
even being able to logically sort of connect those
Mm-hmm.
dots doesn't necessarily make you feel great, but it at least starts to help you to start to give grace and
That's right.
not allow that, conscious thought to now become something that takes root and just, is another voice telling you you're not valuable.
Yeah. And I would say back to our previous conversation, like, don't feel shame or guilt for being too sensitive. There was something that made you feel that way.
Yeah.
So just acknowledge it, that there were things that led me to be hurt, that broke some things inside of me. That doesn't make me bad. It doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me a ninny or a whatever. There's something that's broken that needs healed. I'm going to take care of it and heal it so it can be strong. And I'm going to be honest with myself about if I have certain expectations of friendships or relationships, I'm going to ask myself if they're reasonable expectations. If they're not, I'm going to work to change those. And if I feel like, no, this is what I need from a relationship, this is a reasonable expectation, and I'm going to seek out people that are in the same frame of mind that I am to engage in those relationships instead of having expectations of certain people that they cannot meet. Because you are not trying to be unkind and hurtful to people, but you are not capable in this season of life of meeting those kinds of relational expectations from friends.
Yeah.
So if someone needs that, they need to go find a friend who is in the same season with the same expectations as them. It's not a statement of you're not a good friend. It's just like Greg just doesn't have that to give.
Yeah. I've seen it too, where somebody comes and maybe they are being a little too sensitive. And I say that with all respect, like not trying to say that it's all your fault, but I've seen people when they're in that spot and you try to go, well, let's look at through their lens and maybe this, and then they emotionally take that as you not being supportive. So now I'm another person who is now against you and you feel that way. And so I think we all have to kind of take our own personal responsibility to pull the nose up emotionally in our own lives, be able to kind of step out of it.
Watch out for our confirmation bias.
Yeah. And to kind of go, okay, otherwise I think you're just sort of doomed to like painting humanity with this broad brush of like, dude, all everybody ever does is hurt me. And now I'm just wallowing in self-pity. And then that also becomes very counterproductive to relationships because healthy people, when they hear you doing that, they're going to try to offer some support, some help. But like if you can't stop and you're just looking for someone to commiserate, you're going to end up with probably some codependent bad relationships. It's just not healthy. So you got to kind of take that responsibility. I'm gonna pull the nose up and I want to fly out of this.
Yeah. So once again, kudos to this person for doing
Big
that. Because I mean, what you've already stated in your question, you're well on your way to getting where you want to go.
All right, let's call it a day.
All right.
All right. Love you.
It's a day. Love you too.